Now, will you ask each question in turn?
All right, this is Keith Weaver with the Top Executive Strategy Podcast, where CEOs, COOs, and business owners share strategies for success. This is 6 questions in 9 minutes because the best strategies are concise business advice. So let's get to it. So question number 1, in a few sentences, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, thanks, Keith. My name is Aaron Weber. I'm the CEO of, aptly named, Weber Investments, which is largely a private equity firm that deals in stage of life with various companies. So entering a high growth situation, going from domestic to international, transition of ownership. We supply both the expertise as well as the capital for those particular coming of age or stage of life type circumstances. And it's a fun space to deal in.
Awesome. Well, good to have you on. Question number 2, what's the best thing about being a business leader?
I think there's 2 things. One, for me anyway, I enjoy the process of creation. I like the idea of having a crazy idea or being part of a team with a crazy idea, turning that into a plan, securing all the necessary resources and bits and pieces that are required to then execute that plan. And then before you know it, you're living inside the idea you had, or it's creating opportunities for other people, or a product or a widget or a service that previously wasn't available. I love that ex nihilo process of creation where the idea turns into a plan, turns into something real. I also enjoy
satisfaction at the end.
Yeah. And along with that, I enjoy the process of teaching and mentoring and helping people learn both the art and science of business and therefore as a metaphor for life itself. I think that's incredibly rewarding. And that process of creation or developing of something together with teaching people, for me, really gets me going and excited in terms of doing what I do.
Awesome. All right. Question number 3. I hear from other business leaders that the people strategy in their business can be often more challenging than the actual business strategy. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I mean, obviously, you don't want to make broad brushstroke assumptions because you don't know individual circumstances, but people strategy is more ambiguous than business strategy because business strategy, I think you've got more control over many of the variables. You do your plan, you do your research, you execute. Yeah, serendipity kicks in and fun stuff happens, but you've usually, if you've got a good plan, got a contingency, a plan B, or you've thought through how you would handle this particular thing. With people, you've got stated and unstated motivations and biases and proclivities that you've got to manage through individually. And then you've got the interrelationship of all those as they intersect, as they work on your plan. So yeah, more ambiguity in terms of people management than process or business management. But frankly, that ambiguity lends itself to a much richer environment. Dealing with people, working through issues with people, seeing people grow and do more than maybe they thought they were capable of because you saw more in them than they did. That can be incredibly rewarding. And frankly, that's part of the richness of being in business is you can engage with people in doing something. And so, yeah, they're distinct, they're different. One certainly has a little bit more ambiguity than the other.
Very true. All right. So question number 4, what strategy would you like to share with other business leaders today?
Well, I'm going to go the extra mile, Keith, and give you 2.
Awesome.
First one is cash. It never ceases to amaze me how little control or projection or focus companies have on cash. At the end of the day, the enterprise, in a for-profit business sense, is nothing other than, or should be nothing other than, an ATM, a cash-generating machine. But yet, all too often, business owners, entrepreneurs, C-suite folks are focused on every other metric other than cash. And to give you an idea of how foolish that is, I mean, you don't pay your employees or you don't bonus them with EBITDA or here is an uptick in a metric, take that to the bank and enjoy your vacation. You pay them and they expect to be paid in cash or a cash equivalent, something that can be turned into cash. So my advice from a financial perspective is build all of your dashboards, your key indicators, all of your focal points, have them back or turn back to a focus on cash. Ultimately, you can't well, you can, but it's illegal. You can't fudge cash. Cash is, the money in the bank is the money in the bank. EBITDA, all these other sort of, increase in customer acquisition, all that stuff is wonderful, but the end result, the therefore what that should lead to is a generation of cash, because that's the fuel that frankly fuels everything else. The other one, as a complete pivot, one's financial, the other one's more strategic and managerial, and that is as a leader, as a business owner, C-suite individual, I see an amazing lack of consistency in terms of strategy. It's the strategy du jour, or here's where we're going to go this week or this month, or I had a crazy idea over the weekend and burned my entire weekend when I should be resting on fossicking out a new pivot to the plan. Or it's a consistency of mood. I mean, we've all, hopefully you haven't, but my guess is we all have worked for a boss that was just inconsistent. You never quite knew what version of the boss you were going to get. And so you're in fear and trembling as to bringing this particular issue to him and her. And so my job, your job as business leaders, is to be almost boringly consistent, such that the hallelujah moment for me is when someone comes to me with an issue and I share with them my spectacular wisdom. And then they say, well, I knew you'd say that. And I think to myself, hallelujah. That means that I've been consistent around my people. That means that they're able to operate in an environment with an extrapolation of my mood and needs and desires and priorities imbued in their psyche. If you will, I'm the big cog in the clock, or the big gear. All the smaller cogs in my organization feed off my speed and my direction. And when that big cog is inconsistent in terms of speed or direction, all that does for the smaller cogs is break off teeth or cause them to disengage until the big cog figures himself out and they frankly never actually re-engage. So two very different issues there, Keith. Cash is king, old cliche. And just if you're the leader, if you're in charge, just be consistent. Doesn't mean you can't pivot, doesn't mean you can't allow serendipity to kick in, but just be consistent as to strategy and direction and speed and mood. You'll be amazed at the impact that has on your team.
When, ironically, those two are the biggest sources, in a lot of ways, the biggest sources of stress in business. Lack of cash flow and inconsistency causes great deal of stress.
Well, and frankly, the second one usually feeds into a dearth of the first. True. I mean, when you're continually reinventing the brochure, it always makes me smile when the new CMO comes on board, how we have to redo the branding and packaging and brochures and all the rest of it. And it's usually done for his or her resume. They can say, we rebranded company XYZ. The reality is the amount of cash you burn through for that for questionable return. And I'm not suggesting branding has a questionable return, but doing so regularly is just a burner, just burns through cash. Right. So yeah, there's business as a wonderful gestalt of interrelationships, and consistency and cash are ones that you wouldn't think so, but very much linked.
Awesome. All right. Question number 5. What other successful business leaders like yourself would you like to acknowledge and you think would be great on this podcast?
2 of them, actually. Again, I'm going to give you a bonus. One is Ron Gabori. Both of these gentlemen I work with reasonably often. Ron Gabori is an absolute genius in terms of reinventing, thinking up novel strategies, looking at something and saying, hang on a minute, we can do this better. We can do it in a new and interesting way. And, the old cliche of there are no new ideas is accurate, but the same old ideas or the same old things uniquely applied with a twist is a skill that Ron has in great measure. The other is Mark Beeching, who is another individual I intersect with often, just never ceases to inspire me relative to marketing strategy overall. Again, we kind of joke around with what we call a BGO, or a blinding glimpse of the obvious. And usually the obvious isn't obvious until someone points it out. And then we say, yeah, that's right. And that's what happens. And Mark is great at distilling all of the mess and the noise into the BGOs such that they then become actionable and can work on. And Ron and Mark and I have a whole bunch of fun doing what we do and helping companies discover their BGOs and then helping them pivot to those and moving forward from them. So Both those gentlemen would be certainly better than listening to me, and wonderfully talented individuals.
Well, we only have about 10 seconds left, but for question number 6, just kind of a fun final question. Tell us about your favorite past boss.
I'm going to pivot that and say my least favorite boss was the one that was inconsistent.
There you go.
Version of him I was going to find. I'd be in fear and trembling on an issue, take it to him, and he'd be like, "Oh, no big deal. Don't worry about it." Another issue, I'd think, "No big deal. This will be a piece of cake," and he'd just tear me a new one because, and it got to the point where I disengaged. And it was just wasn't worth the variability, the ambiguity, and the risk of engaging with him, which left an awful lot of opportunity on the floor that we couldn't engage in just because of his inconsistency. The guy was brilliant, but inconsistent.
Right. Well, hey, it's been great having you on. Real quick, tell people how they can find you.
You can find me through my website, weberinvestments.com. That's with 2 B's and plural investments, one word. Or LinkedIn, Facebook, all the usual channels. Feel free to reach out, and happy to chat and engage and be corrected in terms of some of my theory here.
Awesome. Great having you on. And this is Keith Weaver with the Top Executive Strategy Podcast. And to follow us and for more insights, follow us at Weaver Business Coaching or on LinkedIn. And best success to you.
Thank you.